Welcome back to another episode of the TFR podcast. We are back today for our final episode of 2025. It is myself, CJH, joined by Logan once again, and we are here at the very, very end of the season. We've even done another podcast a couple of weeks ago reviewing Lando Norris's World Championship success, but we are back again here for our proper end of season review where we round off everything, bring 2025 to a close, and then we'll be next looking ahead to 2026 in our next set of podcasts. How you doing, Logan? I know you're looking forward to spending a bit of time of reflecting on the year that's gone by.
Some parts of it, yeah. Some parts of it were kind of straightforward, not too exciting. Like the pecking order didn't really change at any point. But I think all in all, it was a good year. We got something different, and I mean, what is there to say about next year? New regulation changes, chaos will ensue, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, bring on the chaos. I think everyone can agree with that. And to be honest, we kind of needed this reg change. I think when I first saw them announce that the regs are changing and, you know, we're going to have different cars, at the time, which was probably a good couple of years ago now, I was thinking, well, that's a bit early for the change, you know. I really just got started with these regs, but it was absolutely needed in the end because these cars definitely have almost outgrown themselves in a way of what we had at the beginning of 2022, where it was actually quite exciting, rapidly became the problem that we actually tried to solve in the first place. And I look forward to smaller cars and all that stuff, which we'll obviously talk about at some point. But yeah, it's been a funny season, hasn't it, Logan? Because to be honest, the way it started, I actually think set the tone for a bit of a dull season, dare I say it. And I think it still had a little bit of that about it. But it was more at the end of the season where there was the potential of the championship going to the wire, which it did in the end. That's what really kind of rejuvenated things, didn't it?
Yeah, it was just a combination of Max out driving his equipment and McLaren a lot of mistakes. But yeah, I agree with the whole we need a change. I think the biggest mistake made in these regulations is when they tried to deal with the porpoising via rule changes. And because before those changes, you could get such a high percentage of your downforce through the ground effect, the following was great. But it was when they made those floor regulation changes that things only got more and more dull. I mean, because the more downforce that you have to generate aerodynamically off the top of the car, the worse it is for the car following behind. Whereas if we can open things up with what they do with the ground effect, you know, that's not going to affect the car behind. So the racing will be better because of that. And yeah, we had a lot of races this year where people just really couldn't do much of anything.
I think that's the point. There was a lot of, like you say, races where it became a qualifying championship. I remember people saying that at the start of the season. I was like, well, you know, give it a chance. But it definitely became that, where it was a qualifying championship where if you had a bad qualifying, you could basically count out your chances. I think the only time we saw that kind of change was Verstappen at Brazil, where he had a brand new car, brand new engine as well. And, you know, we really saw someone kind of, you know, charge through the field, which we didn't really see that much at all during the season. But obviously at the start of the season, it was all to do with the kind of McLaren pair fighting it out with each other, and Verstappen was hanging in there because he had that fantastic drive in Suzuka, I'm pretty sure it was, where he obviously took that incredible pole position. I think, to be honest, of all the poles this season, I think that for me was the lap of the season, Logan. I don't know where you stand on that one, but that for me was quite unbelievable.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. I mean, I think you nailed it. He shouldn't have got pole, but he did.
Yeah. And then he obviously hung on and won that race. And at that point, it was chopping and changing, really. We had, I remember in China, which was, I'm pretty sure, the second race of the season, we obviously had the big story of Hamilton in the Ferrari and the hype behind that. And he won that sprint race. And at that point of the season, way back in March, people were thinking, oh, wow, like Hamilton, that is going to be it with Ferrari. And they're going to be a great success. It couldn't have gone any worse, to be honest, from that point onwards. And we will obviously get into that later in the episode. But then, as the season progressed, Verstappen fell away. The two McLarens continued to have a bit of a dogfight out front. Piastri was definitely with the upper hand for a chunk of the season, with Norris, his biggest flaw being the little mistakes in his game, with Piastri being the more consistent driver. And then, kind of in the second half of the season, that all flipped around. Piastri became the super inconsistent driver. Norris still wasn't quite winning races yet until the very last chunk of races, but it was Verstappen who rocked up after the summer break, 100-odd points behind, then one in Monza, one in Baku. We also had the Mercedes, it was George Russell, actually, the only driver really of anyone else that could get in the mix, winning a couple of races at Canada and Singapore. And yeah, it was a fascinating season in terms of certain races. I think certain tracks, it was definitely a bit of a dead rubber, and you kind of knew McLaren are at the front, and then you got your Mercedes Red Bull little battle, or shall I say Mercedes and Verstappen, and then the rest, how they came. We had a very good midfield battle, though, I think, this season, Logan. I mean, I feel like that was quite unpredictable in a lot of races this season, where you had at one point the V-Carb as the best team in that area, and then it'd be Williams, and then it could be Sauber. I think that was actually probably one of the better bits.
Yeah, I agree. To me, the interesting parts where all the driver changes.
Yeah.
Going into this, seeing how Tsunoda fared, seeing how Hamilton fared at Ferrari, exactly as I said it would, by the way. Sainz going to Williams. Also went how I said it would go, but it was interesting to see how Behrman did in the Haas, Hulkenberg at Sauber was. We got a lot of interesting driver performances in terms of what equipment they had to them. Only disappointment I have going into next season is how few lineup changes there are. At the same time, do we really need that excitement with the new cars, the new regulations? So I do still think that even without a lot of driver moves, we're still really building towards something exciting.
I think that's the thing. I don't mind the lack of driver transfers when there's other things that are taking the limelight, if you like. You need that balance in some ways. I remember that a few years back, I think it was 2020 going into 21, I want to say, where we had a lot of driver transfers, like Vettel leaving Ferrari and Ricciardo leaving McLaren, etc., or joining McLaren, shall I say. And that provided a lot of interest with that season, although the cars were, again, very similar in some ways. You had those extra factors when, you needed that to fill the gap of other things. So, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, you mentioned driver transfers. The whole Verstappen to Mercedes talk was one of the biggest things of this season, really in the middle part, I would say, of the kind of year where that was dominating every conversation until that finally ended. I think it was Singapore when Russell and Antonelli were confirmed, and we're probably ready for that to come back around next year, unless that Red Bull Ford is a very good car. We're probably expecting that whole Verstappen transfer chat to continue on to 2026. But moving on, though, we have our 2025 predictions to have a look. Now, I say we. Obviously, you didn't quite do the season preview podcast, Logan, so I'll let you kind of chip in here in terms of if you want to add anything as I kind of go through some of these. But it was myself and Luke, who's unfortunately not here today. I'm going to kind of pick out some of the interesting ones, let's say. I mean, I will say I called it right in terms of Norris being champion. And I have this written down here, and I am not making that up. So that's at least one win for me there. But Luke, this will make you laugh, Logan. I hate to say this with him not here. Luke had a certain Lewis Hamilton to be world champion.
I'll say it before, I'll say it again. I'm not saying he sucks, but with that said, Lewis Hamilton, the most overrated driver in history.
There you have it. I mean, that I'm sorry, Luke, but that was the Hamilton Ferrari hype getting to you. It was getting to you there, and yes,
Work. How can you win a championship when you're not even the best driver on your team, let alone in the best team?
it's the thing. I mean, yeah, it gets worse. I have more to come, but that was a pretty big howler. That's the thing. It takes a lot, but my top five was Norris, Verstappen, Russell third, with Leclerc fourth, and Piastri fifth. So I'll hold my hands up. I got Piastri quite badly wrong on that one, but I feel like that was not too bad. Luke's top five was Hamilton first, like I said, Norris second, Piastri third, Russell fourth, and I think there's a mistake on here because I don't see Verstappen, but I'm seeing Liam Lawson here behind Russell. And that is surely not right. There's somebody, I think Verstappen is in the mix somewhere, but it's just not quite on that bit there. It must be that he was further up because, yeah, I'm not sure Lawson is right there.
Whatever quality he had to me has just been evaporated.
Well, the rest of my top 10 was Hamilton in 6th, Antonelli 7th, Lawson in 8th. Bear in mind, for people listening to this now, Lawson was in the Red Bull when we made these predictions. Gasly 9th. I think I've had a bit of a shocker with that. With then Alonso in 10th. For Luke, he had Antonelli in, I would think that would be 7th. With then Gasly in 8th, Ocon 9th, and Alonso 10th. Pretty good. He also had Sainz to beat Albon. Didn't quite happen this season. I said the same. Didn't happen. At Haas, I had Behrman to beat Ocon, so I'll take that. It was the other way around for Luke. He had Ocon to finish in the top 10, so that one didn't quite pay off for him. However, he did accurately predict Tsunoda to be about, I think on this, that's about 15th, which I'm not exactly sure where Tsunoda finished in the end. I can very quickly bring that up. But you know what? Considering he was in the RB at the time, so I'll take that with a pinch of salt. That was actually not too bad. Tsunoda actually finished 17th in the end, so even worse than that in the end. He predicted Stroll to finish bottom of the drivers. That didn't happen. I said Bortoletto, actually. I was quite harsh on Bortoletto, actually. I don't know why I said that one. I had Doohan ahead of Bortoletto. Jeez, I've had a shocker there. I mean, even on Luke's prediction, he had Doohan ahead of Hulkenberg, Hadjar, and Bortoletto. So there's a little bit of a howler there. But apart from that, there's not too much else to make too much of a note of. In the constructors, we both said Sauber would finish bottom with V-Carb in 9th. Both got that pretty badly wrong there. We then I had Williams in 8th, Aston Martin in 8th for Luke, and then the flip reverse for 7th. We then both had Haas in 6th. Obviously, Haas in the end finished 8th, but they weren't too far off. There was quite a close battle for 6th in the constructors. But then the big mistake here was we both had Alpine in 5th, Logan. What's your reaction to that? I mean, what went wrong for Alpine this season? Is that just a car thing, or did they just screw up with the drivers so many times, or what do you put your finger on?
Both. They screwed up a little bit with the drivers, but the car just wasn't good. I mean, I'm hoping that they're just going all in on 26, so we'll kind of see them back to form. I do kind of like the team. I love that Alpine blue. It's on point. But yeah, I think they're just going all in on 26. Who was 10th in the constructors when it's all said and done?
Alpine. Alpine was rock bottom of the constructors, only 22 points this year. So really, really bad for them. And
or 22 and be last nowadays, like,
I
kind
know.
of just shows how the grid really was.
But they were a one-man team. All 22 points were from Pierre Gasly. Jack Doohan and Frank Colapinto both didn't score any points all year long. In terms of the top four of constructors, I had McLaren top, Ferrari second, ouch, Mercedes third, and Red Bull in fourth, with then Luke saying Ferrari first in the constructors, McLaren second, Red Bull third, and Mercedes fourth. Luke had a lot of faith in Ferrari. I don't know where this comes from.
I don't get it. I mean, I think we should just copy and paste the clip of the final results of Albon being better than Sainz and put it on the back of him defending Sainz to the death for some reason.
Yes. Yeah, I think poor Luke, he's not even here to defend himself. So I think it's time to swiftly move on from that segment of the podcast, just to not shame us any further. But moving on, then we are gonna get into our kind of awards. If we're gonna call it that, yeah, TFR Awards of the 2025 F1 World Championship. And we're starting off with our top 5 drivers of the season. Now, I'm going to let you go first on this one, Logan, as I've spoken enough already in the last 5 minutes or so. So you can fill me in from 5th to 1st of your top 5 drivers of the season and tell me why for each.
Wow. Hold on. I got to think of it in reverse order now.
Oh, go ahead. Go on. Just say 1st to 5th. I won't put you on the spot like that.
So, first off, I'm talking about our drivers of the season. So, I'm talking about how good the driver performed in comparison to the equipment that they're in. I'm not just talking about drivers standing because we were just talking about where they ended up in the standings. And obviously, it's just first, fifth, right?
Very true.
So, first is Verstappen, and it's not particularly close. Do I even have to explain anything? Don't think I do. Number 2 is already where things kind of get tough for me, but I'm going to say George Russell. The Mercedes wasn't the best. He won 2 races, and he really was a leader for Antonelli and that team and put in a lot of really good performances, sometimes getting in between the McLarens, getting involved with Verstappen. So in what he had, he did a really good job. Number 3, I'm debating what third through 5th. Number 3, I'm gonna have to say Hulkenberg.
Wow.
He got that podium, and that car was a crap box. And that wasn't his only good race either, so it wasn't like a one-off. Now, he didn't have the best year overall, but like you can tell that the way that Sauber drove and raced was like they knew that if they just had everything go normal status quo, they couldn't compete. So they very much went for it in terms of setups and strategy. So obviously you're going to have very fluctuated results. So I feel like the reason we saw that was less because of the drivers and more just because of them just knowing they had to go for it. Getting that podium, he had a few amazing drives, beating Ferraris at times. That was really good. 4th, I'm gonna have to give it to Norris. He did clutch up the championship in the end. Wasn't particularly great all year long. But to be fair, he should have had the championship earlier because if we're talking about him versus Piastri, he had the mechanical failure and Piastri didn't. So he literally lost out on what they were first and second, 17 points in that regards. So it almost shouldn't even have went down to the last race. But that's racing. You have good luck, bad luck. And, just comparing apples to apples, he had the mechanical failure, Piastri didn't. So that would be number 4. And number 5 to me is pretty hard. Like, my gut is telling me I could give it to Piastri. He was really on form, especially at the beginning of the year. He wasn't great all year, but he did have a lot of great drives, great qualifying sessions. I'm also thinking Albon. The Williams wasn't particularly great, but he beat Sainz in the Williams, which I predicted. And they did do a great job overall. I could even see giving it to like Ocon or Behrman, what they did in that Haas. It just gets really tough, but I'm gonna give it to Isaac Hadjar
Nice.
because he had that to sound British, that shocker at the beginning of Australia to start his career, right? And he really turned it around. He seems like he's got a really good head on his shoulders, and he obviously has talent. And I do think like he's really coming along. And in terms of the freshest crop of drivers, your Dewins, Colapintos, Bortoletos, Adjars and all of them. As it stands right now, like I rate him the best of the lot by a little bit of a gap too, not a significant gap, but by a decent gap. So I feel like I gotta give him a shout and give him fifth overall. I want to say Piastri, but it's like McLaren was so good this championship show. Like to me, I compare it to like 2019 Mercedes, where it's like the car was the best, but not so much the best that no one could ever compete,
Mm.
right? And then what was it? The first 7 races of the year for 1-2s for Mercedes, because like Hamilton's really good when you can just turn a race into a time trial. He's really good in open air. I don't even necessarily just mean in the lead. Like he's really good at like long-term management consistency, backed by a good qualifier. Bottas is like not quite as good in the qualifying, but maybe a little bit better in traffic. So it's like, but they were both doing great that whole year. So like it wasn't just the car; those drivers were doing incredibly well as well. Like so, if we could go back in time and have the 2019 grid, if we have 2019 Bottas and Hamilton and those McLarens versus these two McLaren drivers this year, like do we think that this 25 team beats that 2019 Mercedes team or comes even somewhat close? Like I don't at all. I don't even think they win more than 4 or 5 races.
Really?
So yeah, that's why I can't really put a Piastri even in the top five. I was gonna give Norris fifth, but like, hey, he won the championship and he did come up clutch when needed, and he didn't mess up in the wet as much as he has before. Still did.
That
Still
is
wasn't the
true.
best in the wet, but he
But
didn't have the absolute shockers that he's had the rest of his career.
exactly. So that was Verstappen, Russell, uh, Hulkenberg, Norris, and Hadjar.
Yeah,
Nice, nice. I like
I
it.
mean, it's tough, but I feel like that's at least a decent.
Yeah, I like it. It's very different from mine. So there's quite a mix here. Um, yeah, because I'm tempted to make a very very late change with this as well. But I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it. I think I am gonna slightly change it at the last moment. But anyways, I'll read it out. My number one driver of 2025 was, of course, Max Verstappen. I thought he absolutely outdrove that car and almost won the championship in by far not the quickest car, which I think any driver that almost does that. Same for the likes of Fernando Alonso in 2012. Any driver that can do that, I think, has massive, massive credit in the bank. And this was one of his best seasons, I think, in his career so far, because you think of Japan, you think of Baku, Monza, and Brazil as well. Although he didn't win that race in Brazil, I thought that was just incredible, that comeback. I'd actually almost go as far as say it's one of the drives of the season, for him to drag a podium out of that one. So Verstappen, for sure, was the best driver of the season for me. I then had Lando Norris in second, and I'll explain myself on this because I know a lot of people hear that and think, well, hang on a minute, he made so many mistakes this year and had the fastest car. And he did. He did make a lot of mistakes, and his first part of the season was very iffy, and he would definitely not be in the top five if you were judging it off that. However, he had a lot of setbacks, but every single time he was bouncing back this season. Look at the mistake he made in Canada, where he put himself quite far back behind Piastri in the championship, and he clawed that back. He then had the reliability issue in Zandvoort, put him back again, clawed that back very quickly. And I think for me, the two races at Mexico and Brazil, where he was unbeatable almost, I actually think no one was going to beat him on them days. The combination of driver and car just kind of sold it for me that, yeah, he actually had a good season in the end. And those drives almost won him the championship for me. Your Vegas Qatar, that's out of his control. Like that wasn't his fault, and he would have wrapped it up long, long ago. So that's why I've got Norris in second. I've got George Russell in third. Very easily could have put him in second. I think he's had a fantastic season. The most consistent driver, I would say, throughout the whole year. And with a slightly better car, I think on certain races this season, I think he would have been a bit closer at the kind of top of the standings. He would never have won the championship this season, but he could have definitely been a lot closer. I think he also destroyed Antonelli as a teammate, although it was his rookie year. It just showed the difference between the two drivers at this moment in time. But yeah, I think Russell is ready to fight for a championship now next year if the car is able to do so. I think actually got, this is my late change, I had Piastri fourth, but now I've got Charles Leclerc in fourth. And I think, to be honest, he had 7 podiums this season. And I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but there was a lot of front row starts and a pole position at Hungary. I think with how bad that car is, he's actually had a pretty good season, because to get that many podiums, and Hamilton has 0, by the way, and 0 pole positions, I think that's pretty damn good from Charles. He's definitely not up there with the best of this season. I think there's a bit of a gap from him to Russell, but I think Leclerc has actually gone a little bit under the radar with some of those performances, considering how rubbish that car is. And then in fifth, I've got Oscar Piastri. I was going to have Carlos Sainz there, but then I did remember he had such a bad start to the season. I think, to be fair, Logan, he had 2 podiums in a Williams. 2 podiums in a Williams. That's pretty big.
But how could you put him better than the teammate that...
I know. But Albon had a bigger drop-off for me in the second half of the year than Carlos had at the first part of the year. Considering Albon has been at that team for year after year, knows the car inside out, that for me was inexcusable for him to drop off. If Albon kept his season consistent how it was, for sure he's in my top 5. But for Sainz to get 2 podiums in a Williams, he was in it, but he's not in my top 5 now. He's like knocking on the door. So anyways, Piastri, who is in 5th, for me, he had a huge drop-off, and there's no getting away from that. It was arguably one of the worst collapses in terms of a leader of a championship we've probably seen in a long time. But there's no forgetting, 3/4 of the season, he was the best in terms of the McLaren pair and the grid. He was winning race after race in dominant, kind of boring style, which is the mark of a champion. So I can't forget that, and so Piastri sneaks into my top 5. Any thoughts on that, Logan? Anything you want to rip apart there?
Oh, really?
Nice. That's good. I'm glad that we're quite aligned. So perfect. That's the top 5 done, dusted. Now we're on to something that might take a bit longer. We've got our 5 biggest disappointments of the season. Now, this one is a little bit more open to different things. It could be a driver, it could be a team, could be a race, could be anything. So I'll hand it straight back over to you, Logan. What are your 5 biggest disappointments of the 2025 season?
Number 1, Hamilton. Absolutely destroyed. On track and mentally. Everyone thought that everyone has him on this pedestal for some reason. And this year showed exactly where he's at, for real. He can't just rock up and beat anybody in any equipment. He never could, never has, never will. People hold him as like the best ever for some reason, which I don't get. He got destroyed by Leclerc and Hamilton racing in traffic. bottom 5 on the grid.
Ouch.
Taking him after his incidents or not, he doesn't make his way through like other people do. So yeah, he's the biggest disappointment of the year. Completely outclassed. Could not handle the new team. Could not handle being in a top car. Number 2 is Alpine, bottom of constructors. Didn't really seem to care. Maybe they're just building for next year, but that's a big disappointment. Number 3 is the Red Bull second seat. I know it's Max Verstappen. I know the car is not easiest to drive. Man, with the exception of Perez and Ricardo, that second Red Bull seat just eats alive whoever's there. Number 4, I'm going to go to Sainz. Almost the same thing as Hamilton.
That's harsh.
And he did have some good races. It's not like he had an awful year, but people put him on this podium that he's a top-tier driver and blah, blah, blah. And he got beat at Albon by Albon, who I don't think anyone was rating as like, that's a top 5 guy on the grid, you know. So I would say that's number 4. Number 5 to me, okay, I thought it was tough, then I remembered Ferrari. They're still strategically inept, and the car it only seemed to get worse over the course of the year.
That was number 5, wasn't it? I was just keeping track there. So that was Hamilton first. Was that
Alpine second.
That was it. Alpine second, Tsunoda third, and then just that whole
general
thing. Yeah, and then fifth was Ferrari. What was fourth again? Sainz. That was it. Of course. How could I forget? Well, I think the Sainz one's very harsh. I think Sainz is harsh. I think Ferrari, I think that could be a little bit higher, maybe. Alpine, I agree with. I agree with the Red Bull thing. Yeah.
People had him on that pedestal. That's why. But like perception
Williams.
versus like, yeah, he had good races. I'm not saying he had a bad year, but I'm saying like people thought like, wow, Sainz is just gonna walk into Williams and run the damn show.
He might be running it now though. Going into next year, he might be. I think they are pretty equal though. I think it's a good lineup. The pair that they have at Williams. No races or other kind of factors coming to mind that were a disappointment this year? Nothing else that kind of rings a bell?
To me, my disappointment isn't really in this year. Like I talked about earlier, it goes back to when they made those rule changes. I feel like these cars had the potential to have good racing for a very long time. But because they took away the ground effect and just let it go to the top aerodynamic parts again, of course it was going to turn into a dirty air fest. The racing in 2022 was spectacular. And we're like, you know what? That's great. Let's just go back to what it was before. I don't know. I am so confused by the existence of the FIA. If I had to give a number 6, I would give it to the FIA. Just because their stewarding is so inconsistent that people can watch sport, see it from 50 camera angles and still be like, I don't know what's going on here. You know, like the fact that things are so iffy and situational, it's like things can be way more cut and dry with how you race and what the rules are, but it just seems so subjective all the time.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. Right, my 5 biggest disappointments are, coming in at number 1, I have Ferrari. Now, I say Ferrari because this was a team that almost won the Constructors' Championship last season, and this season they couldn't even win a damn race. And that is the first time that's happened, I think, since 2020, and then obviously 2016, those 2 seasons in the last 10, that's happened. But they were so bad at certain races, and it was, for me, only kind of Leclerc dragging something out of that car. And all because they weren't satisfied with the philosophy of the car last year. They believed they couldn't upgrade it anymore, so they decided to rip that up and change it all, and they only went backwards, which I just think is an unforgivable mistake.
I like it. I like the mindset.
Yeah.
I like the mindset this is good, but it's not the best. And if we want to be the best, we got to go for something new. I
Mm.
at least respect that philosophy. It didn't work out, but if they would have kept with what they were doing, they knew they weren't going to win either. So either take the path you know is a losing path or risk going down with the chances of going up. I think that's a good way to go about an F1 team. You're not there to be third, fourth, especially when you're Ferrari and you're already there. You got to make that push for the next step. And they had to change something. Didn't
Yeah.
work, but I at least respect them for trying. They didn't just get complacent and sit there, you know.
Yeah, that's
My
true.
favorite story is how they view themselves. They come off as very cocky and closed off, but it's like they know they have what it takes, or they think they know that they have what it takes to be the best, and they want to be the best, and they're not happy with second. You need that mentality.
Yeah, you could say Mercedes are in a similar kind of way of thinking, if you like. But I just feel, considering this was the year where there was going to be hardly any development of the car anyway, and I think Ferrari did check out of all development on this car since April, which is a crazy thing to say. I think that was maybe for me where I'm like, I totally get what you mean, but was it worth doing that if you're not going to develop it much anyway? I'm not too sure. They'll be hoping, they'll be fingers crossed that next year they can get back to the front, because if they're not, then it really is starting to get pretty bleak at that team, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think the idea was they go for this, and then if it doesn't work early and they're not fighting for it, then they alter to 2026.
Yeah,
You know
that's
what I
true.
mean? If they stayed where they were, then they would know they can't win constructors or drivers by April, and they start developing the next car. This one, they at least take a shot at being up there early on. Okay, it
Yeah.
didn't work out. We move on anyhow. They don't really lose that much. I mean, yeah, they lose the money from constructors, but like, did they need it?
Mm.
They're good.
Yeah, they put, their all their eggs in one basket in some sense of like they were all in on this year in terms of the initial car design, and if that didn't work, then they were checking out. I think the damage that has maybe caused to Hamilton and Leclerc's kind of minds, I'm not too sure if that was worth it. But at the end of the day, it is what it is for Ferrari, and they are well and truly focusing now on next year. In second, I've got Lewis Hamilton. I think he had his worst season in his F1 career by a margin. I think last year wasn't too great from Lewis, but at least he had some wins to show for. This year, to not even have a podium is just not acceptable from a 7-time world champion. It's giving me vibes of when Michael Schumacher, to this day, by the way, in 2009, on this day, he rejoined Mercedes for the 2010 season, and he stayed for a couple more after that. It's giving me Schumacher Mercedes vibes, where you once had it, but you haven't got it anymore. And Hamilton's joined Ferrari. For me, I called this in the season preview podcast. It wasn't the right decision to make. I didn't think Ferrari would be a team that would suit Lewis. And that's proven to be because of so many different factors, whether it's the language, whether it's Leclerc's team already, whether it's, just a different philosophy of, the way they go about things. Ferrari have always had good drivers over the years. It's never been the drivers that have denied them winning championships. It's always the car. If the car's not there, you're not going to be able to drag that team into winning a championship. Schumacher went to Ferrari in the 90s, and it took him a good few years to get that team perfect to how he wanted it. And that still took the likes of Ross Brawn, Jean Todt, and so on, all in the background to make things click. I don't see that with Ferrari at the minute. And for Hamilton, it was a disaster, really, to put it straight. That sprint victory in some ways almost made this worse for him because it gave a false perception that it was working when it absolutely wasn't. So Hamilton is in second. This one might be quite harsh, but I've got Yuki Tsunoda in third. Just him. I just think he's just had a really bad season. And I know that second Red Bull car is clearly not the same as the first. But I just think, Tsunoda was just also not on it. He's not done himself many favours. Even in Abu Dhabi, when he kind of was weaving in front of Norris and didn't really do a good job of holding him up anyway, I just thought like, yeah, you've not been on it. So that's why I've got Sonoda in third. I've then got Jack Doohan in fourth because you know what, Logan, he was only here for 2 races, something like that, and he was so bad. He was so bad for every single race qualifying session. I mean, that Suzuka track, he's done a Super Formula test recently, and he crashed at Daytona 1, I think, 3 days in a row, or 4 days in a row even, when testing. And that track, he just seems to be cursed there because he had a shocker in qualifying or practice when he binned that car at the first corner. And I just think Jack Doohan should never been in that seat from the get-go. And then in fifth, I've got Esteban Ocon. I think Ocon has actually had a pretty bad season. He started off all right, had a good result in China, but then really got outclassed by Behrman in the second half of the year. And considering Ollie's in his first full season in F1, when Ocon is arguably should be almost at the peak of his powers, that was actually slightly embarrassing for him to get beaten how he has by Behrman, and he should have been the outright leader of that team. So I think it's been a pretty bad year for Esteban. So he comes in at number 5. What do you think of that list, Logan?
Pretty good list. I like it. Different takes, different people, different reasons.
Yes.
Pretty
Perfect.
respectful.
There we are. There we are. Well, next up, we've got a bit more of a positive one. It's our top 5 best teams of 2025. So once again, I'll hand it back over to you, Logan. Who are your top 5 best teams of this year?
I mean, again, I'm not going to go with just constructors' results. Number 1, I'm going to give to Williams. This driver lineup they got is darn good, and it's not a night and day change at the snap of a finger. They're getting better and better and better. A couple podiums this year, a lot more points, better constructors positioning compared to the last decade. You know, it's going in the right direction over at Williams. So they're doing a great job, and their future's looking bright. If their next car is competitive as this one with the driver lineup they got the tools there, especially with how small the team they are in comparison to the other one. Number 2, I'm going to say Red Bull.
Ooh.
I think they got Verstappen, obviously. But what they do strategically, like, can we say there's a better team in F1 strategically than Red Bull? I don't know if we can. You know, they are the ones that get the better strategic situations. They've got what it takes to be champions, and we know that. Even if they don't even have the best car, they can still make it happen. Look at 2021, for example. Number 3 through 5 is where things start to get tricky. To me, at number 3, I'm going to go Sauber.
Wow.
They know their car sucks. They know that they're becoming Audi next year, but I really liked how they went for it. Like I said earlier, they know they just can't have things just be normal and status quo. They got to go for it. And they did, and it worked for them a lot. How often did they do a different strategy, different setup types, or trying different drastic setups? And if it didn't work, it didn't work. They were going to be out of the points anyhow. But there was a lot of times where it did work, and they were able to get Bortoletto in points. They even got Hulkenberg a podium. Car never should have been doing that. That car should be P9, P10 in the championship, and it be not particularly close. It should be P10 in the championship. They shouldn't even be beating Alpine. Especially when you have like Hulkenberg, who's always been great in his later years, and then a brand new driver. Like, everything's set up for disaster. But it seems like the future could be bright for them. Bortoletto developed well. Hulkenberg's still on it. The team was making solid strategic decisions. Hopefully a lot more funding coming next year. It seems like they're really doing a good job of building things forward while at the same time getting as much out of the here and now as they could. Number 4, gonna say Mercedes. Even when they're not at the top, they're still winning races, not making awful strategic calls. And I think they're doing a good job with Antonelli. They're finding that line between letting him develop while also getting on him. at the same time. And they've got George Russell happy, it seems. And, Mercedes is so elite that even when they win a couple races and are towards the top, a front running team, but not winning a championship, we consider it's like, wow, Mercedes sucks right now. That just shows how good they are. Number 5 is pretty tricky for me, if I'm being perfectly honest. But you know what? I just realized what number 5 is. Number 5 is Aston Martin. Because
Really?
they knew regulation changes were coming. Who did they get?
Adrian Newey.
Gosh darn right. To me, going in the next season, the thing I'm most eager for isn't seeing the new cars or the liveries or potentially like any different like tracks or rules or any of that crap. Do the cars pass or not as well? What's going to happen to that Aston Martin? Is Aston Martin about to shoot up the order like we saw in 22? And that was without me. And they have Alonso, who we know is still good. Ooh, there's a lot that could be happening there. To me, that's the most intriguing thing.
I think that's very, very true. I think that's the thing with Aston Martin in terms of the performance though this year. I'm not sure I'd have them in my top 5 because they checked out a little bit like Ferrari and others where they kind of didn't really focus on this year too much. But I totally get what you mean. The Adrian Newey signing and the obviously Honda engines that are coming in next year, which was actually last year when they announced that. I think they're going to be really interesting to see.
I'll say this. I got one more thing to add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't follow every sport. Was there a bigger signing in any sport bigger than Aston Martin getting Adrian Newey this year? I don't know if you can get bigger than that. We got the car guy in the car sport.
And he's the team principal, though. That's the only thing with that. I'm like, is that right?
Anything for the car. Like, he's going to do nothing. Let's be real here.
I guess.
You know what I mean? Like, what signing in any sport was bigger? What player in another sport has the track record that Newey is, where it's like, he goes somewhere, they win. Period. End of sentence. No one does it better. Arguably ever. He goes to a different team. What team can say they pulled something like that off in anything this year?
Yeah, and this is the point. It's a signing like what Red Bull did way back in 2007, I think at the time, or 8, when they managed to poach Adrian Newey. He had left McLaren, was needing a fresh idea, and Christian Horner convinced him to come over to that team, and that was it. From 2009 onwards, Red Bull were at the top of F1 or thereabouts ever since, and yeah, you're right. It's going to be fascinating. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see where they shape up for next year. But yeah,
8 drivers' championships because of his cars.
Yeah, it's scary numbers. That's the thing.
It's not like, oh, comes and you might get one a decade. It's...
No, he has. His success rate is very high. So yeah, I think that's a very fair thing to chuck in there. A bit of a curveball that I didn't expect. Mine's a little bit different. However, I do agree with a lot of things. My top 5, I've got Williams in at number 1. Absolutely agree with you on that one. Most improved team, and they have gone just up and up every year since James Vowles join that team, and then the lineup is just brilliant, and I think they are going to be another interesting one to watch next year if they continue this trajectory. I've actually got McLaren in second, and I'll explain myself here. I totally understand they almost threw away the Drivers' Championship from their own incompetence and crazy mistakes in Qatar and Las Vegas. However, they did get both titles, and it's the first Drivers' Championship since 2008. And they've done back-to-back constructors, and they were by far the best this year. Again, different kind of season where there's been no real development and no one's really been chasing them down, apart from Verstappen and Red Bull in the end. But I still think McLaren have had a very good year, and there was chunks of this season where nobody was going to get anywhere near those two cars. So I've got them in at second. Sauber in at third, the same as you. Great lineup. I think Jonathan Whitley's doing a good job there as well. And considering where they came from last year, where we were saying they are just so bad, they have actually turned a really positive corner. And I think that is an exciting thing with Audi coming in next year. I think they'll be one to watch. I've actually got VCarb in at fourth. Now, my points with this, I remember they had a few bad strategies at the start of the season, but I can't, put them down too much for that. I think they built a very good car for this year. It was very drivable, nothing too crazy. And when Laurent Mekies was at the helm at the start of the season, I thought he was doing a really good job in terms of managing Hadjar and how well they were performing at certain tracks. There was a conversation at that stage where people were saying, is the RB quicker than the Red Bull? Which was nuts at the time. But there was that genuine thing of, have they actually got a better car because of how stable it was to drive? And in the end, they finished ahead of Aston Martin, Haas, Sauber, and Alpine in the constructors. I think that's a pretty damn solid year, because even Liam Lawson actually came on really good towards the end as well. So I think, they've earned those stripes for me. And then coming in at fifth, I've got Mercedes. They've won a couple of races this year. Wasn't the greatest year in terms of wins and what they maybe hoped for, but with a brand new driver coming in with Antonelli and how well Russell's been, I think they can be fairly chuffed with what they've done, because they were super consistent and probably had the second best car for a big part of the season. It was only really Verstappen and Red Bull that really leapt forward in the final third. So yeah, I've got Mercedes fifth. I haven't got Red Bull in the top five, because I felt like they were so one-sided. It was just like Verstappen team. So for me, that doesn't earn much credit for me. I don't know how you see that, but yeah, that's why I haven't quite got them now.
Makes sense.
Perfect. This is almost too easy, Logan. We need more to disagree on. I mean, usually these things take 2 hours to record because somebody disagrees on something, but at the minute, we've only got a few more things to go, and this has been absolutely smooth sailing. Race of the season next. I thought this was quite difficult. I was thinking about this when I was doing my notes, so I'll go first on this one, because I think you might need to think about this a little bit, Logan. But this was quite hard because I think we haven't had loads this year. There's been a few. Australia, the first race of the season, was quite dramatic, although there was quite, dull parts of that race, but we had quite a few things that happened at Australia. Silverstone with Hulkenberg on the podium almost took my pick because of how amazing that was, and I think that, again, the result of that race was quite something. But I've gone with Brazil as my race of the season. Maybe not quite for the battle for the win, although that was in question for a chunk of the race, but mainly for a couple of things. Verstappen's comeback, I thought, was unbelievable to watch. I thought it was amazing seeing cars getting overtaken like that for once. We haven't had loads of overtakes this season in that way, and Verstappen charging through the field was just, it kept me glued to the screen. And then we had the collision with Leclerc, Antonelli, and Piastri. It was a drama-filled race, and considering it was a dry race as well, it actually, I thought, was pretty damn good. What about you, Logan? What is your race of the season?
I would have put Brazil up there too, but to be different, I'm going to say Australia. Not only was it a
Okay.
chaotic, but when you have the first race of the season, when you're trying to figure things out, when you have a chaotic first race of the season, it just really makes you ask questions. Wow, is this what going to be like the rest of the year? Is this
Yeah.
really what the pecking is? So that excitement not just during the race, but the speculation that it built afterwards, I thought was spectacular.
Yeah, it was an amazing opener because, yeah, I remember that bit when the two McLarens went off the track as well, and that the rain kind of just hit the circuit. It was just crazy. Like, you never thought that was going to happen. So, yeah, I think that's a very respectable pick. I'm kind of thinking there's another race this season that I'm kind of forgetting. I can't think of something else, but because there was quite a few where we had crazy results, like Baku or Qatar, things like that. But they weren't necessarily amazing races. That's why I've not necessarily included them. What about overtake of the season, Logan? What have you got for this one?
I got the correct answer.
Go on.
Turn 1, lap 1, Imola. Verstappen around the outside.
I've got the
That was
exact
ridiculous.
same. Yeah, I it it. You know what? When people, former drivers as well, are saying that it's like, what's happened, or how's he just done that, it's a pretty sensational thing to do. He was third going into that corner, Logan, and he just let off the brake and just swooped right around the outside of Piastri. I will say, I think Piastri's defense wasn't too good on this one, but I don't think he could almost do anything about it, could he, Logan?
No, he just wasn't Max Verstappen in that moment.
Yeah, no, I think that was a mega move. I also think Max's move on Russell around the outside at Brazil was pretty good. Piastri on Hamilton, actually, at Saudi, I think that was a brave move when he's in that middle part of the track with the DRS open. And yeah, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. I feel like there's maybe something obvious that we're missing here, but I'm sure someone can let us know in the comments if there's something that we've got wrong there. And finally, on our TFR Awards, we have the Rookie of the Season. What have you got for this one, Logan?
Isaac Hadjar.
Exactly the same. This is what I mean. It's too easy. This is too easy. We've just said the same damn thing.
We ain't saying ridiculous things like Hamilton's going to win a championship at Ferrari.
um, why is Hadjar your Rookie of the Year?
Plain and simple, look at the results. Look at the mentality. Look at the comeback after the first race mistake.
Yeah.
Look what team he's on next year.
Yes, Hadjar obviously in the Red Bull. I'll be fascinated to see, will he be the one to finally get on top of things with that car? Yeah, I think for me, Hadjar was the most balanced best rookie of the year throughout. And I wouldn't even say he had that many bad races apart from his opener. When the difference is, Behrman, Bortoleto, Antonelli, they all had bad parts of the season. They all had bad mistakes, crashes, take your pick. Hadjar, I really would struggle to think of a crash that he had throughout the whole year that was his fault as well. I think he may have had a crash at Silverstone, but apart from that, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. And to get a podium as well, and an RB is quite something. I think Behrman was up there as well for me. Antonelli was too inconsistent. Bortoleto was just, he was very good, but just not enough. Liam Lawson, is he really a rookie? Do we say he's a rookie?
It's not better than Hadjar anyhow.
Yeah. And I think that's I think that's all of them. And of course, Jack Doohan. Yeah. Less said on him, the best.
Yeah,
And that is that. Yeah, that is that for our 2025 our awards, shall I say. So well done, Logan. We got to the end of it. Any final thoughts on this season? Any kind of takeaways that we've not kind of covered? Or other things? I think we've pretty much gone through each team and driver of note of what's been good and bad. But is there anything you'd like to add?
it was just interesting to see how the inter-team battles went in terms of like how much did someone overperform someone else. I feel like we had a lot of surprises in that regard. or even if it wasn't surprising the result, they're surprising the gap. It was just an interesting year seeing how early some teams gave up development. So that kind of just makes next year even more exciting. So I really look forward to testing. Like, I am so pumped to see testing next year and
Well,
start to see these teams stack up and what these cars are like and how the drivers adjust. Maybe some drivers will just be better at this type of car. Maybe some drivers that have been great won't be great in this type of car. To see.
yeah, it's funny, isn't it? How we get to an end of the season and suddenly the mind shifts, if you like, towards the next year, and then that takes a lot more of the attention. When I think it's gonna be fascinating to see. As a little teaser to end this podcast, give me your top 5 in the constructors off the top of your head. Who do you think is going to be where on your top 5? Because we obviously have Cadillac joining the grid next year. We have Audi replacing Sauber. We've got Ford partnering up with Red Bull, Honda, Aston Martin. What is your very, very, very early top 5 in the constructors' standings, Logan?
Mercedes, Red Bull, Aston Martin, McLaren. The fifth one's hard.
Tricky.
You know what? Audi.
Ooh, I like it. No Ferrari,
Wait,
unless I
did I say Audi?
misheard that.
I meant Alpine.
Alpine. That's even more bold. I've got, in no particular order, Mercedes, Ferrari, Aston Martin, Audi, and Red Bull. I haven't got McLaren in there, which will probably infuriate many, but we will see. We'll probably be very wrong by the time preseason testing rolls around, which is only, I think I saw somewhere, it's only about 35 days away, I think. It's the beginning of February, so we are getting very close. So we are going to enjoy Christmas and New Year and a bit of January before we'll be back with our next episode in 2026. But thank you to everybody who's listened to the podcast throughout this year. Thank you, Logan, for joining me on many of the pods, and thank you to the other guests as well, Tudor, Luke, JP, and it's gone from my head. Patrick, that's it. Patrick, that's the correct name. But yes, thank you to everyone for this year, and we'll be back next year for our next episode. It's Lando Norris, who is the 2025 world champion, but all focus now shifts onto 2026, and we'll see what happens in the next one. We'll see you then.